This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Dakar, the capital of Senegal, is also known as the art capital of West Africa. This vibrant city is home to the Dakar Biennale, the longest-running large-scale contemporary arts show on the continent. Dakar is also home to the newly minted Museum of Black Civilizations. It's the largest museum in the region and is housed in an ultra-modern building inspired by traditional African architecture. Its creation was the vision of the poet Léopold Senghor, Senegal's first post-colonial president, and it aims to celebrate Black civilization's contributions across the world. So what and who makes Dakar such a hub for artistic creativity? On this special edition of Talk Africa, we're on location to find out by talking to some of the most prominent movers and shakers of Dakar's contemporary art scene. I am Liu Feifei, and this is Talk Africa. To tell us more about the museum and its impact, we're joined by Hamadi Bokoum, Director General of the Museum of Black Civilizations. Thank you so much for joining us on Talk Africa.
Thank you, too.
You know, museums exist to capture certain aspects of history. Interestingly enough, your museum here has quite a history of its own, dating back some 50 years. Tell us about the genesis of this.
Mais écoutez, c'est vrai, vous avez raison, c'est une très vieille histoire. Depuis 1966.
Listen, you were right. It's a really beautiful story. From 1970, people started working with President Léopold Senghor and experts from UNESCO because at the time there weren't any Senegalese experts. The project plan was finalized near the end of the 1970s with a Mexican architect and a Swiss museum expert, and a lot of Senegalese were sent for training to learn how to manage the museum. Unfortunately, President Senghor died and the project was abandoned. The project was taken up by President Abdoulaye Wade in the year 2000. I think the museum is a great gift from China. I think it's one of the greatest museums in Africa and maybe in the world. It's a great museum, a great gift, and we will do our best to make sure this museum remains relevant in the museum world.
L'ambiance muséale mondiale.
How is this museum housed here in Dakar, Senegal, how is it similar and how is it different to the other museums, the great museums, the Louvre, the British Museum, the Smithsonian, which also has sections dedicated to African history and African culture?
Oui, je pense qu'il y a beaucoup de différences entre ce que nous faisons ici.
Yes, I think there are a lot of differences between what we are doing and what the British Smithsonian museums are doing. I think in all the spaces, African art is presented in its past form. That's to say, during colonialization, the colonial authorities brought back many pieces from Africa. That's why we're speaking of restitution right now. These pieces represent only a small part of Africa's production. African art spans around 7,000 years. So these 200 years of colonization, if we were to put it into terms of 24 hours, would represent maybe 1 second. Are we going to forget 59 minutes of our production and heritage to only highlight the art produced in the colonial period? So the museum's vision counteracts this narrative, we believe, in a holistic approach towards the African production of art. This need to focus only on what happened during colonization is giving importance to Berlin. And if we give importance to Berlin, we will never have the African Union. So this museum is also a space of defragmentation.
On ne fera même jamais l'Union africaine. Donc ce musée, c'est aussi un espace de défragmentation de la mémoire éparpillée du monde noir.
Now, it's been estimated that 95% of Africa's cultural artifacts have kind of been stolen in kind of a diaspora, if you will, across the world in, museums, public and private institutions in the West and perhaps North America. In France alone, it's estimated that there are more than 90,000 pieces from sub-Saharan Africa. I want to ask you, what is your perspective on these stolen artifacts? Now, I should mention French President Emmanuel Macron, of course, has promised to return these artifacts. What do you think about that? And when and how do you think it will happen?
First of all, I think we have to clearly define this category of cultural heritage. When I hear that 50 or 80% of Africa's cultural heritage is outside of Africa, I don't think it's exact. When I think of African heritage, I think of it in terms of the last 7,000 years. I think that more than 90% of this heritage is still in Africa. This cultural heritage has been at the center of many discussions, but I think the idea of recuperating it is very interesting. But we have to do this with a lot of intelligence. What we have to avoid doing in the space of African museology is giving too much significance to this period. For me, what is in that period is important, but it is not essential. What is essential are the things we are discovering every day and what we are creating every day in our contemporary spaces. This is what we should highlight. We're not going to keep fighting for ourselves in a colonial frame of mind. I think these objects will come back to Africa. They've already started coming back. One item has been returned, others will be. But we shouldn't center the whole cultural discussion on restitution. Restitution is an important question, but if we only focus on it, we will keep running behind colonization.
Some of your colleagues, your counterparts in Europe have put forth the arguments that the artifacts should not be returned because, well, they might be susceptible to theft on the continent of Africa, that there are inadequate facilities to house these priceless pieces of artifacts. Also that maybe they have better resources to curate the pieces in a larger collection. And finally, that African history is indeed a part of human history, and isn't it better to display it in a place such as Paris where more humans can view them, as opposed to a place in Dakar, Senegal? How would you respond to some of these arguments?
Well, I think the arguments about us not having the space or the infrastructure make no sense. Return our belongings. We will do what we need to do afterwards. This is the main point, to put it radically. It's true a lot of European colleagues use this argument that there isn't enough space or tools, or that if the objects were returned, they would be in danger. But when the objects left here, they weren't in a museum. They weren't in museums. They were in the open air. They were with ancestors. They were in the sacred woods. When they were in the sacred woods, they were alive. When we put them behind glass, we killed them. Maybe if they come back, we will revive them. Maybe you'll see these masks walking around. So when our belongings are returned to us, we will do with them what we want.
Now, having said all of that, I understand you have welcomed back some of the pieces. Can you tell us about these?
Voilà, écoutez, il y a une pièce, mais c'est une pièce qui nous appartient, qui nous a été prêtée 3 fois.
This piece belongs to us and has been loaned to us 3 times. It was loaned in 2005, 1998, 2008, and the third time in 2018. They really like the number 8 in relation to this piece. So President Macron decided on a sort of restitution, so to speak, that the piece is being loaned out. For the moment, it's being loaned out, it's not restituted. It's a symbolic piece, not only for the Senegal, but for communities in Mali as well. When the piece was restituted, people came from Guinea, from Niger, Nigeria, Mali, of course Senegalese people as well, and everyone was very interested in the piece. I was given the piece. It was very emotional. I think that some pieces hold a very strong symbolic place for Africans. These are the pieces we will ask for back first. For example, Benin asked that a number of important pieces be returned to them. So I think in every country there are pieces like this. People will ask for these pieces back to have a part of their history returned. In the convention we signed with the French authorities, this piece will be allowed to travel. This means we can bring it back to Halvar, El Hajj Umar Tal's birthplace.
Village natal de El Hajj Umar.
So what are the biggest challenges that you face in this new job of yours?
The challenges are everywhere. Everything is challenging here because it's a new experience for me, even though I've been in charge of other important institutions. But it's a new challenge for Africa and the diaspora. There's not that much communication between Africa and the diaspora. In Africa, we have to create conditions which welcome the diaspora, and culture is one of these dimensions. If we're able to reconnect culturally, the problem will be solved. This is one of the challenges. The other is to prove that Africa can have these major institutions that maintain a global standard. We're not thinking on a macro level. We're aiming high and looking to put ourselves on the highest level in the global world of museology. The most important challenge, and I've said it before and will say it again, is the cultural dimension. We have to make young Africans and those in the diaspora understand that we were not always in last place. They have to understand that we are the origin of humanity. We led humanity for a long time, and that the blows we were dealt by colonialism were not fatal, and that we can rebound. Actually, we are rebounding. Everyone says this is Africa's century. Well, let's make sure it is our century, and let's start with culture, because everything happens in the mind.
What are some of your own personal favorites on display here?
My favorite piece is not necessarily the most important one. It's the one I like. It's the Laboratory of De-Berlinization. It's a piece that was created in 2008. It was showcased during the Dakar Biennale and is now exhibited in this museum, the De-Berlinization. You know, between 1884 and 1885, there was the Berlin Conference. The Europeans came together and cut Africa into little pieces, and everyone took their part. France, Germany, England, Belgium, everyone took their part of Africa. That was the Berlin Conference. The idea behind the Laboratory of De-Berlinization is to burn the Berlin Conference. If we want to develop Africa, we have to get out of the borders set by that conference. I think it's a futuristic and visionary piece. At the same time, she created Afro money, which they included in the piece. I think you have to respect this artist. They created a monumental artwork, but all the other pieces are beautiful as well. I love all of them, but in terms of vision, I adore this one more than the others.
Well, I'll definitely go and check that out as I explore this amazing museum you have here. Hamadi, thank you so much for talking with us. Thank you. And on that note, let's take a short break. When we come back, we'll meet a couple of local artists whose talents are recognized around the world. Stay tuned.
Life moves pretty fast. Ideas move at the speed of sound. Technology moves at the speed of light. If you don't filter out the noise, you might miss the details. We pay attention to the details because they matter, showing you a different perspective. See the difference.
Welcome back to Talk Africa. A local artist with international acclaim whose work is exhibited right here at the Museum of Black Civilizations is V.A. Diba. We're very fortunate to be joined right now by this highly respected artist. V.A., thank you so much for joining us.
It's a pleasure, my pleasure.
You have a number of pieces displayed here. One of them is titled Illusion. Tell us about the inspiration behind this piece.
Thank you. This piece is very important for me in the context of Africa. Immigration. Last year, something like 3,800 persons died in the Mediterranean. Cross the river is a problem. Cross the sea, going overseas in Europe is a very difficult problem for the young Africans. This piece is the title, Illusion, is kind of, freedom is a kind of illusion for many young people in Africa. Freedom is to go everywhere at what time you want, but if you try to go out the continent or out your country, you realize the freedom is kind of illusion.
And it seems that throughout your various different pieces of art, be it on the canvas, be it installations or performance arts, you have always incorporated a social message. So what is the overarching theme that you're trying to convey through your different pieces?
Art is very serious, and very deep, and because the artist is not only superficial thing, is a person who can understand the deep situation of the population and try to project for the future. That's why all the material used here, you have canvas, textiles, acrylic sometimes, and sometimes I use the charcoal, something like that. All material around me is a kind of possibility to create something with. And for me, this is art. This and performance, because usually our culture is very dynamic. The art historically is one element of the daily life. It's not out of daily life. It's one of the elements who structure the life.
You have been creating art for many years in your pieces. You've had solo exhibits, you've been part of group exhibits all over Europe, North America, anywhere you name it. You've got pieces at the Smithsonian's National Museum of African Art. But what does it feel like to have your pieces exhibited right here in your home at this museum in Dakar, Senegal?
We have historical things, the rapport, the connection between people art was not a connection in one space we call museum. The connection is very, which art is in the daily life. The problem for the people is to understand the level. They have a problem of local education of art, of aesthetic. My piece is everywhere in the world, but to be here is a kind of important signification, because it is a question about here. It's not a question about China, it's a question about Senegal in 2019 or 2020. It's a kind of vision, it's kind of a kind of observation of somebody about the realities. And to bring this kind of peace in Africa and make a big event like Prête-moi ton rêve is one of very important activities in the country, because most of those artists, they are very famous in outside, nobody knows them in our own country. This is a problem. This is I think that's why it is very interesting to have this kind of exhibition and my piece inside, I'm very glad to.
You are now known and recognized as so much more than just an artist or a teacher. You're actually a powerful voice of social activism. You actually serve as the president of the National Senegalese Association of Visual Artists, and you're also a member of the Economic and Social Council of the Republic of Senegal. So I want to ask you, what is the role of the artist in social activism in politics?
Social activity is a kind of school of artists to understand how the society functions.
Did it start with your first post-colonial president?
For me, social thing is a kind of school to understand. Without that, the question is kind of big abstraction. The life is real. Life is real. The state is real. We have to be real and to care in the reality of the society. We have to talk with state to understand what's the situation of artists, what is the possibilities to develop art, what is the role of the artist, and what kind of participation you can do in the global things.
And you yourself, through your social activism, has also brought about some changes. Tell us about the things that you've accomplished. The biennial.
Biennial, you know, this is a long history, you know, and 1989, I just became the president of National Association, and we organized the 4th Salon. The Salon is a national exhibition. And at that period, Senegal was very developed. Visual art was the most developed section in Senegal. And I introduced in my speech to Abdou Diouf during the Salon in 89 to create an event who make a connection between us and most important artists in the world. And they said, okay, and they agree with, and they create the Biennale.
And now, of course, it's one of the most acclaimed events in the art world.
We are very lucky, and it's an honor for us.
So well done to you, and thank you so much for taking time to speak with us.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And here are the works of Soly Cisse, another local artist who has exploded onto the global art scene. His workshop is actually not far away, so let's go there to meet him. Hey Soly, thank you so much for chatting with us.
Merci.
Thank you. Hello.
Soly, you are very commercially popular. Now, you've been named by Forbes as among the top 100 contemporary artists in Africa, and your works have been exhibited in galleries and museums all over the world. What do you attribute to your success?
For me, it's not really about chasing success. For me, it's about pleasure, first and foremost. And after pleasure, I am aware that hard work will take me far. I'm someone who's very curious in terms of research. I like finding new techniques and evolving them. What motivates in art is advancing all the known techniques, because for me, creation equals discovery. Creation equals research. Okay?
You are a mixed medium experimental artist. Tell us, what does this mean to be an experimental artist?
Yes,
I am a multimedia artist. I'm someone who uses a lot of mediums. For me, artistic creation is an experimental process. An artist is like someone who works in a lab. They need to keep looking and looking. For me, the goal is to reach a level where my work is important, where it remains powerful and incontestable. This is my goal in life.
Now, we're surrounded here by your paintings, your creations. I can see, even for me, I can see there are monsters, half human. There are also animals with very vivid colors. What inspires these creatures that you paint?
Actually, when I was really young, I lived in Mali for a bit, in the region of Kai. I lived with my father, who was a doctor and who worked in this region. And we were surrounded by forests. We lived close to a community of hunters. I used to hang out with the children of the hunters. So I was used to seeing animals sitting around. I was used to seeing wild animals. And a few years later, when I returned to Dakar, I realized I was inhabited by these animals. In my work, you sense the spirit of these animals who were invited into my universe.
Your canvases start with black paint. Why is that?
This is a question I get asked all the time. My dad was a radiologist. He used to make x-rays, the x-rays which are used for medical uses. They're x-rays of lungs, skulls, eyes. The sheets are black. So whenever my dad threw away these sheets, I used to paint on top of them. I learned how to paint with x-ray sheets. The sheets were black, so my subconscious got used to a black background. Because I learned how to paint on dark backgrounds, I did make it a priority or a rule to use a dark background. It was just instinct. Because I developed something very different with a black background. It's voluntary. It's just easier for me when the background is dark. But I am not going to do a whole song and dance about this.
Of your sculptures, I've looked at the monsters and they're very thought-provoking. But for me, the cotton flowers made of iron are delicate but powerful at the same time. Can you tell us a little bit about the story behind your cotton flower sculptures?
The choice to make iron cotton flowers. I had a project in Gorée to produce some work. Now, Gorée is known for its sad history in relation to slavery. So I said to myself, what can I do with metal? What can I do to retrace the island's history? That's when I had the idea to create a field of cotton. If I create a field of cotton, it will remind us of the fields in America, the fields which were exploited and cultivated by the slaves. That's when I had this idea to use metal. Why metal? Well, metal is very solid. It's a material that's very resistant. And also the slaves' chains were made of metal. The chain bracelets remind us of the oppression. So I said, of course a field of cotton has to be in Gorée. In the beginning, a lot of people called me crazy. They said a field is not possible. They said a field made in metal will take you a lifetime to create, maybe 10 or 20 years. I said, no, just 8 months works for me. And then I said, I'll do it in 8 months. And in 8 months, we completed the field.
So it's certainly important to remember our past and the history, but I know you're a man with an eye towards the future, right? Because you said in the beginning you want to keep creating and keep innovating. So what's next for Soly Cisse?
I fall prey to my evolution. My work does not fall prey to my evolution. I, myself, fall prey. I listen to my work, I advance it, and therefore I am, because my work is very spontaneous. This is to avoid cheating, because spontaneity doesn't give you the time to cheat. So what I like about painting and art is being fair and truthful. I like being sincere in my sentiments and manner of doing things. That's the only thing that preoccupies me for the future as a result of what I have in the present and also with references to the past.
Well, hopefully we'll randomly meet you again. It's been a pleasure chatting with you, Soly. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
And that's all we have time for on this special edition of Talk Africa. A big thank you to all of our special guests, Hamadi Bokoum, Director General of the Museum of Black Civilizations, and Viye Diba and Soly Cisse, two of Africa's most prominent contemporary artists. You can watch this and more episodes of Talk Africa on our YouTube playlist and the CGTN Africa website. And do remember to keep the conversation going through our social media handles on Facebook and Twitter. From me, Liu Feifei, and the entire Talk Africa team on location here in Dakar, Senegal, thank you for watching and see you next time.